Hi.
What's up? Hi, Christina. I hear you are in like deep, cold winter right now.
It's ridiculous degrees outside. I believe, hold on, allow me to check. It was like minus 35 with the wind chill this morning. It currently is minus 27, but feels like minus 39.
Well, I know in our class yesterday, I had a Canadian and an American, so I was trying to talk in both languages in terms of Celsius and Fahrenheit, and I couldn't do it because as soon as it gets like minus, I get confused. And
Yeah,
so,
well, because they get really close together at those minuses. I'm gonna switch it to Fahrenheit so I can talk to our American friends, and it's very close. So in Fahrenheit right now, it's minus 17, but feels like minus 38.
oh, yeah, disgusting.
So this morning, our walk to school, because yes, you're Canadian when you still walk your children to school in this temperature, was a little chilly. It was definitely cold. Oh, there's Debbie. She's in the deep freeze with me.
Yeah, the deep freeze of Calgary, Canada right now.
However, I will say it wasn't real windy this morning. That's what's supposed to get worse, like in the next day or two. The wind is supposed to really pick up. This morning it wasn't windy, but literally like walking to school with my kids, you could see this much of us. Like there was like everything was, and then I couldn't talk because I had my scarf pulled all the way up, and if I talked, my glasses fogged.
Oh, I do not miss that at all.
I'm just a little excited that next Wednesday I come to Mexico. So, and I mean, yes, of course, it has something to do with seeing Lindsay, but more than anything, it is to get out of this. So.
I love it. I love it. Well, guys, welcome to Coffee Chat with Christina and Lindsay this morning. Minus the weather woes, we are talking about some pretty important things today. Again, as Christina and I do pretty much every time we talk about Coffee Chat, we take a look at what's kind of come up over the weekend and the last few days and what people are really talking about. And one of the things that came up for us over the weekend in both of our groups, so we have our Recipes for Weight Loss Success group, which is a free bariatric kind of support group, as well as Bariatrics Beyond the Honeymoon, which is for anybody kind of 2 years plus, was indulging and drinking after weight loss surgery. So, Christina, let's start with indulging first and what that kind of means and to you and kind of in our community.
So generally speaking, I break indulgence down to two different categories, kind of. So in your loss phase, indulging, versus in your maintenance phase, indulging. And those are going to look different because your goals are different in each one, right? When you are in your loss phase, your indulgence should be few and far between. It should be irregular. It should not be on any sort of regular basis. It should be totally irregular. And it should come up for things like birthdays or maybe anniversaries or like one-off situations. I don't believe, and I mean, again, this is my personal belief, but I don't believe you should be having like a regular cheat day or anything like that when you're trying to lose weight. I don't think it's good for your mindset in terms of like, calling things cheat and then not cheat. And like, I just feel like that's like terrible terms for your brain. And also you're in your loss phase, you need to maximize that loss phase and you need to really be changing your habits. So if you're allowing those old habits in, say once a week, I feel like that's like, a slippery slope to get into. And then once a week becomes twice a week, then becomes 3 times a week. And before you know it, you forget that you're even cheating anymore because you're like, oh, what am I doing? Isn't this just how I eat? So of course I believe in balance during your loss phase, but to me, balance just looks like eating regular foods. So there are certain things, and I mean, everybody knows what their slippery slope foods are, but they just should not be allowed during your loss phase. You can maybe introduce them again in moderation after, right? Ruth just said one cheat day soon becomes every day. It is very true. Unfortunately, those of us who have lived in the obesity world, we don't have great self-control. We're not real good at self-regulating and being like, oh, I can do that one day a week or one day a month or whatever. So you need to find those specific foods for you. And it's not a blanket thing. It's not like, you should never have bread, you should never have rice, you should never have donuts. Like, it's not every food. I'm fine. Bread was never a slippery slope for me. I eat Ezekiel bread. I'm never going to binge on Ezekiel bread. It serves a purpose, but it's not binge worthy. I ate Wassa crackers. Again, not binge worthy. I ate a tiny bit of rice in my loss phase, but I don't really like rice that much, to be honest. So I'm not a big rice eater anyways. I stayed totally clear of pasta or pasta for those of you in the US during my loss phase, because that is a slippery slope food for me. I love it. So I will indulge occasionally now, but very, very rarely. But during my loss phase, it was completely off the table. And any sort of baked goods were totally off the table, like not even once, like no cookies, no donuts, no cakes, no nothing in my loss phase. And then my last one that I stayed completely away from was ice cream. And again, it was a slippery slope food for me. Those were some of the things that contributed to my obesity, were those foods. And I just knew that for me, that it was like, those are foods that I can't regulate. I can't stop at 2 bites. I can't do those things. So those were just off the table. The other things that were off the table for me were takeout. I did 0 takeout during my loss phase. It was 10 months long until I got to my goal. And I literally did not have takeout one time in that 10 months. Not once. I was that person that if we went for takeout, I pulled out my protein bar or my Wassa snacks and tuna and ate it. That, you know, it's hard to do, but for me, takeout, you guys have heard my takeout stories many times that I was a takeout queen before surgery. So again, it was something that I just had to eliminate completely during my loss phase. So I was fairly strict in a lot of ways, but I certainly wasn't living on chicken and broccoli. I mean, you guys see all the delicious recipes that we create. That's what I ate during that loss phase. And, you know, I would, because I wasn't allowed baked goods, like traditional baked goods, that's when I started making energy balls and protein cookies and all of that kind of stuff to sort of replace those things. And that worked for me. So to me, that's kind of how I did indulgence. And it's going to be different for everybody, but I just felt like those things had to be completely off the table. But then lots of other things, like I said, rice, bread, like those kind of things I allowed myself because those weren't problem foods for me. So I hate when I see in the groups, you know, you can't have this, you can't have that, you can't have that. Because if it wasn't a problem for you, then you can have it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because, again, we've worked with so many people, whether they've been in their loss phase, whether they've been in their pre-phase, whether they've been in their maintenance phase. And the hard part is, like everything, is that there's no one size fits all, right? It's not, you know, what worked for Christina is going to work for you. What worked for Frankie is what's going to work for Tara. What's worked for Debbie, what's going to work. It just doesn't exist that way, which of course makes it very challenging for us to create support plans and to create programs and stuff. But what we have found is, like with everything we suggest, is take what you know works for you and leave everything else. So if you're sitting here watching Christina being like, well, that was wonderful that she didn't do this and didn't do that and did that, but that's not how I work, then you have to kind of sit there and say, okay, so I know that's not how things work for me, but let's figure out what does work for me. Right, I have to do a U-turn in the aisle at the problem food. Right, so Ruth, that works for you. Right, some people can walk through those aisles without even blinking an eye. Right, I've talked a lot about my sister's pantry in the last 3 years of being a part of this, and I was over at her house when we were there over Christmas, just before Christmas, and I swear to God, that pantry like called my names. I wasn't even hungry, and I was just like, pantry. It was the best thing ever. It had everything that I would not even really want, but because the pantry was there, I wanted it. So it's those things that you have to figure out, what is it that you can do to work with, and also really think about what does indulging mean to you. And obviously, as Christina said, in her loss phase, indulging was anything that was on her slippery slope, which was kind of what we would classify her trigger food. That was nothing for her. I met Christina in her loss phase, so when I say it was nothing for her, I mean it was very, very specific. But not everybody can work that way. So what does indulgent look like for you? For me, honestly, indulgence like 3 chocolate bars, a bag of chips, and a Diet Coke. And I'm like, that seems okay, right? Like that's how I indulge. I don't indulge, you know, every day, all day long for 2 weeks. Me, if I'm going to do it, it's a boom, one shot. Oh my gosh, how did I just eat all of that? That's how I indulge. So in order to figure out how to get through that, you have to really understand you. And that's why we always talk about the 4 tendencies. And that's why we always talk about your personalities and those things. Because when it comes right down to it, whether you're watching this and thinking, oh my gosh, Christina, so true, or whether you're watching me and be like, that pantry, you know, so true. It depends on you. And when it comes right down to it, unfortunately, it means that we can't, unless we're working with you one-on-one, be able to say, this is what could work for you. This is what will work for you, depending. But indulgence's a big one. It is a really big one because we've seen it, especially over Christmas. And then as Christmas has come to an end, and it's now whatever the date is, the 13th of January, there's a lot of people still craving carbs, craving sugar, you know, working really hard to not eat something, only to find that they just, instead of not just eat it, they just go the opposite side of that and eat everything.
Well, you have to work really hard on that binge purge, kind of behavior that a lot of us, again, tend to have, where we restrict so much, and it's not purge in terms of like throw up for most people, but some it is. But in terms of like, you binged, and maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but you binged over Christmas and you ate things that you wouldn't necessarily want to eat. And, you didn't do so great. And maybe you ate a couple boxes of turtles, not saying any names here, but maybe you did those things. And then some people are really good at getting back on track. They're like, you know what? I'm done. I had that. Like Lindsay just said, she will binge on these things. And then she's like, oh my gosh, what did I do? But then she can get back on track. Like she has that control to be able to be like, okay, you know what? I got this. I don't want those foods anymore. I know one of the things Lindsay does is she doesn't keep them in her house. So that's helpful for one, because it takes a lot of thought to go and binge like that. Like it takes a little bit of planning. You have to, you have to go buy them. You have to sit down and eat them. You have to open the wrappers one after the other. Like it takes some planning a little bit. It can be sort of impulsive, but it's not totally impulsive. It's not mindless. If you don't have them in your house, if you have them accessible to you at all times, it can become more mindless. But the way that Lindsay binges is not mindless. It's like, you know what? I want this. I'm doing it. And the thing is, at the end of that kind of binge or that kind of indulgence, there tends to be less guilt that happens. Sometimes there's a little bit still because you're like, ooh, I probably shouldn't have done that. But you put some planning into that. You walked into a store, you picked out what you wanted, you went through the shelves, you took it to the cashier, you took out your money, you paid for it, you took it away, you ate it. Like you did all of those things. So you then put, 5 steps in place to be able to binge like that or indulge like that. So it's hard to say afterwards, oh man, I feel so guilty. But you planned that. So like, how can you feel guilty about something you planned? So it's harder to feel guilty. I'm not saying it never happens, but it's just harder. Whereas if you have it just like, in your nightstand, then you open up your nightstand, you dig it out, or like, whatever. Or I know a lot of people in their desk at work is another one. Like if you keep it there and it's just right there, the more steps you have to take to indulge, the less guilt you have and the less frequently you will do it because it's inconvenient.
Yeah, totally. And I actually even go to one step further than that. When I'm feeling like I might be really wanting to just go crazy, I don't even go out, because sometimes I can't get to that brain spot and be like, okay, I know I need to go do this. I know I need to go do that. But you know how many stores are in between that and that? I'm like, I don't want to even have the moment of that. Oh my gosh, dogs are going crazy. So I'm just like, okay, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay home. I'm going to drink my water. I'm going to do what I need.
Well, and see, for me, it's very similar with indulgence. And again, this is part of how I got through that loss phase without having those indulgence things. I have I don't keep those things in my house either. Any of my slippery slope foods, they don't come in my house. That I'm just like, no, if I want to eat ice cream, which I'm dairy intolerant now and I can't, but I haven't always been. So if I want to eat ice cream, I've always had to physically go out and get it. We don't keep ice cream in our house. And my kids know that that's a rule even, that if we want ice cream, we have to go out to Dairy Queen, to Marble Slab, to wherever to get ice cream. The ice cream is better. I'm not going to lie. The $3 bucket of ice cream that you bring home, it's not good quality ice cream. So if I want ice cream, I go out and I get the good stuff and then I have it and I'm done. And often my ice cream, like emotional ice cream cravings, come on at like 8 or 9 o'clock at night when my kids are in bed. There's no going out to get it. And I don't know how many times because Dallas is not an ice cream person, which is good for me. But there's been many times at night that I've been like, so do you want to go get me some ice cream? And he's like, no, I don't. Like, why would I want to do that?
It's so funny. It's so funny you say that. We have ways like that where, for me, Ben's not an ice cream fan at all. So I'm usually like, and this is before because he doesn't drink anymore. I'm like, do you think you should have a beer tonight? Like, it would be really nice. And then if he says yes, I'll be like, oh, by the way, can you grab me some whatever? So it's so funny that we find ways, and that's the thing, right? And that's a really great thing about knowing yourself really well, is that because I know that about me, and Christina knows that, and Dallas won't go get her ice cream or whatever, we are then able to figure out how to work through some of those things, right? And I think that's really, really important.
And when I was a single mom, there was no option to go out and get ice cream when my kids were in bed. Like, it'd be like, I'm stressed, I'm whatever, I'm having these emotional things and I can't indulge. So like, it wasn't an option because it wasn't in my house. So that's kind of the ways that I get through it, is I make it so that it's not an option. And then when I do want it to be an option, then I have to physically, like I have to put all these steps in place to be able to do it. Another thing, again, it does take a little bit of like accountability and personal awareness and all of those things. But like Starbucks is a big one for me, of course. And so I load my Starbucks card with X number of dollars per week or month, whatever works best. And that's how much money I get. Could I technically load my card again? Of course I could, but I don't. Like, it's just one of those things that I'm like, no, that's my Starbucks money. Like, that's just what that's for. And I was talking to a client last week and I was saying, like, if my kids come to Starbucks with me, they always want something and then it eats up my Starbucks money. So now I don't go to Starbucks with my kids. I'm like, no, you're not allowed. Like, your $2.50 cake pop, like, no, that's taking money away from me. So there's just those little tiny things. So putting any of those, and like I said before, the more steps you have to take to indulge, the better it is. So even if, like for me, for instance, pasta is a slippery slope for me. I have pasta in my house, but I have to physically, I have to get it out of the pantry. I have to cook it. Like, I have to have all of those pieces. And if my kids have it, I try not to make leftovers. Because leftover pasta is something that I'd be like, oh, well, I was planning tuna for lunch, but hey, look at that. So I just try really hard not to have those things. So again, putting those pieces in place that I have to put more steps. Ruth just said, what do you do? How do you do that when good food's not important to your significant other? So one of the things that I believe, because Dallas is naturally fairly slim, and he can pretty much eat anything he wants. I mean, he's getting a little older, so it's less, he's less able to do that than he used to be, but he can pretty much eat anything he wants. He has no food restrictions. He hasn't had surgery, nothing like that. So he's fairly healthy most of the time, but he definitely indulges more than I do, or could indulge more than I do. So he's respectful to me though, of my goals. It is totally a respect thing that I say to him, Dallas, I don't want to eat ice cream. I don't want to bring ice cream in my house. Or in our house. So when I say to him, you know, want to go get me ice cream? He will question me and like, he'll like push back a little bit at me and say, you know, Christina, do you really want me to go get you ice cream? Or, you know, are you just craving something? You know, maybe could we make a healthy snack at home? So it is not your partner's job to keep you on track. That is not their position. But if they respect you and your goals and your boundaries and all of those things, they should ask you some questions about it instead of just giving into your every whim. And if they know that there's something that they're craving, if Dallas is craving, I don't think Dallas has ever craved ice cream in his life, but if he was and he knew that I didn't want to eat it, well, he has many hours a day where we're not together and he could go eat ice cream on his own. So that's something that he could definitely do. But I think it's a respect thing. And I think if you set your boundaries and ask your partner that, you know what, I really would like you to respect this boundary. I'm not saying you have to change your eating, because that's your choice, that it's not, I can't decide what you eat, but I'd really like you to respect and not eat this certain food. And it can't be every food under the sun, guys. For instance, again, Dallas is huge into chips. Like, he loves chips. We don't buy them very often, but he could have chips here all day long and I would not touch them. Like, I have no interest in chips. It's not a slippery slope food for me. Don't care about them. So that's one of his things that he's able to keep and eat when he feels like it. But if I said, you know, but this certain kind of chips, like ketchup chips would be my favorite, which I know our American friends don't have ketchup chips. But so I would say to him, you know, Dallas, could you please not bring ketchup chips in the house? Like, maybe you could do all dressed or plain or like any other flavor, but this specific flavor, if you could just avoid bringing that in the house, that would be helpful.
Yeah. And I think it is. I think it's a communication, right? It's having that conversation, just sitting them down. And to be fair, we've actually spoken with clients and we've dealt with, you know, spouses who you say that they're very committed to helping them and very supportive of them, which, you know, they say with their words, but they don't necessarily say with their actions. And this is a time where, you know, communication is a really big thing. And of course, we're not marriage counselors or relationship counselors here. We're not telling you about that. But if you turn around to somebody, whether it is a friend or a business partner or a sister or a mother or a brother, and you say to them, you know what, I would really appreciate this, right? I'd really appreciate not bringing ketchup chips in the house because I just don't want to have them. I would really appreciate if, you, like, when I'm begging on my knees for you to go get me ice cream, you maybe ask me a few more questions than that, or, you know, whatever it may be. And I think it's really important to have that open
goals, or suggest that we walk to the store together, or, you know, give them the things that you would like them to do, because they don't always know the answer. Like, your partner, I mean, they may not be trying to derail you. I don't think most of the time, I mean, there's partners out there that do. But I think most of the time your partners are trying to support you, but they don't know how. You got to remember that for the most part, most of us, I mean, that are in this community, have been overweight for a long time and did indulge. And like, we just mindlessly indulged. Like, you know, hey, Dallas, you could get me ice cream? Sure, of course I'll go get you ice cream. Like, that's what you want. Sure, whatever. That they would never even consider that you don't really want ice cream, that you're just, you know, asking out of that habit that you've done for years and years. So give them the verbiage of what to say or what to do or how to support you. And then you got to be real gentle with them too, because this is a big change for them. In terms of, you know, what's going on. And even if you are in a newer relationship, maybe the person they were with in the past, if they didn't go get them ice cream, it would cause a massive fight and a massive battle. Like, you have no idea where they're coming from with that. So it's tough, but having, like Lindsay said, communication, so important.
And again, as Christina said about the verbiage, I think that's really important, because we've seen, husbands turn around and be like, well, do you really want to eat that? Because it's going to go right to your ass. And all of a sudden the wife goes crazy and is like, well, of course that's the case. With the husband's in his head being like, but wait a second, she asked me to be supportive. I'm trying to be supportive. So understanding that, one, they may not truly know exactly what you want from them. And again, that's where the communication comes in. And two, tell them what you don't want, right? And it's interesting because Ben and I, we are very different motivators, right? Like, I could turn around to him and be like, why haven't you run yet? And he'll be like, oh yeah, I'll go and do that right now. If he said that to me, I'd be like, who the? Like, no. You have to, it has to be a different type of communication. And we know that about each other. And so that's a really good one. So make sure you're having that conversation with them. And again, if they are, pushing back a little bit more on that, maybe ask them why, right? Maybe ask them why they're pushing back. I know you love your ice cream. We're using ice cream in Port Dallas. I know you love your ice cream, Dallas, which she doesn't even love. But this is a big thing for me, and I'm really, really trying hard not to. So I'm actually going to sit in the car while you go into Dairy Queen and get yourself a Blizzard and sit in Dairy Queen and eat it. And I'm just going to scroll on my phone. And you know what? I'm okay with that.
Yep.
And again, so those are the type of things you need to make sure that the communication lines are open so that you don't feel crappy and they don't feel crappy.
And sometimes, you know what, you have to take that personal accountability. In my marriage, when I was married with my ex-husband, that at first he was super supportive. And like, again, we were takeout people, like we did tons and tons of takeout. At first he did none also. And he was really good about it. But then after about 3 or 4 months, he started, like, takeout started creeping in. And so some takeout I was fine. Like, he would say, go get a donair. And I'd be like, man, I don't really care about that. So he'd eat that and I'd be fine. And then eventually it would be like pizza would come and I'd be like, that's hard for me. Like, that was a tough one. So I would literally go up and sit in my bedroom while he ate pizza. And sometimes it did cause some friction between the two of us, because it was like, well, why are you going up to the bedroom? Like, that's rude. And I'm like, well, why are you bringing pizza in the house? That's kind of rude. Like, our agreement was that you would do takeout outside of the house and not in the house. So if you're going to bring it in the house, then I need to, reframe what I'm going to do. So sometimes it takes those pieces that you have to have a little more self-control than maybe you feel the need to. If I would have sat in the kitchen with that pizza, I would have eaten that pizza without a doubt. But what I would do is he would eat his pizza. I'd go upstairs to the bedroom. I'd have a bath. I'd maybe have a shower. I'd do something while he was eating. And then when he was done, of course, he didn't put the pizza away, hence the divorce. But anyways, I would come down and I would put all the pizza away in the box and put it in the fridge. That it's just like, you know what? It's done. It's gone. I don't need to sit there and look at it all night. Like, I knew that those were things that I couldn't do. So he wasn't willing to change his behaviors in terms of that, which in all fairness, he shouldn't have had to. It wasn't his goals. It was mine. He could have been a little more respectful about it maybe. But at the end of the day, it wasn't his goal, it was mine. So I had to sort of work my way around those things. So if the communication doesn't work, then you have to find your ways around it. But I think that there's still things you can do. One of the things that he did do, and I don't give him a lot of credit a lot of the time, but he would order pizza that I didn't like. I don't like pizza with 8,000 toppings on it. It's not my thing. I like a pretty simple pizza. So he would order pizza with 8,000 toppings on it. So it was like, okay, he eats that. I'm not really tempted by that. So that there were things like that you can do as well. And, if he went and got, a cheeseburger or something, getting a burger that I don't really like would be a better option. Like, you really like this specific place, but I'm not crazy about that place. So why don't you just go there? And yeah.
It definitely does help. It definitely does help. Frankie has said here, coffee shops are my biggest indulgence. I have Starbucks money every month, but I also go to a local coffee house once a week at least. It's my social drinking, which, you know, absolutely. I always joke about this because, I mean, whether it's Starbucks, whether it's your local coffee house, you know, whether it's Tim Hortons, which would have been me if I was in Canada, you know, allowing to have yourself that is okay as long as you don't beat yourself up over it, right? And that's a big part.
It's so funny. I was just going to say that. So I had talked earlier about what I feel indulgence, and I don't think we're going to get to alcohol today. We'll have to table that to next week. But I had talked earlier about what I feel indulgence is. And so for me, indulging in that way felt okay to me. And it, you know, if I indulged in a different way, it felt crappy to me. So that's how you can gauge how you feel about your indulgence. If after you consume something, if it then consumes you and you start that vicious cycle of I shouldn't have done that, or I feel so crappy, why did I do that? I'm such a failure, blah, 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 blah. If you have all of that negative self-talk happening in your head, it's not a healthy indulgence. Whether it's unhealthy food or not, it's not a healthy indulgence. If you just put creamer in your coffee and you feel like garbage and you have all that negative self-talk after you do it, it's not serving you. So you need to make sure that whatever you're indulging and however you're indulging, that you're not feeling like garbage afterwards. So if you find that you're indulging on a frequent basis and you're like, I shouldn't have done that, I was so good all week and blah, 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 like whatever you're doing, really listen to, and journaling becomes really important here when you start having those negative or positive even, like when you have feelings around your indulgence, writing them down, and then you can go back and sort of be like, oh, you know what, on Tuesday, I did go to the coffee shop, but I was really happy. I met a friend. We had a great time. Like, you know, I felt good about that indulgence. But then on Thursday, I ordered pizza because I was tired and I was grouchy and blah, blah, blah. And like that indulgence didn't feel good to me. So you can start, if you can't just pick out how you feel and how you indulge and what feels right to you, then starting a journal about it can really be helpful. And then you can sort of go back and look through, but putting more steps in place, I think, is really key for those of us that don't have a ton of self-control. If you make it more and more difficult to indulge, and if your partner is still bringing foods in the house that you struggle with, keeping them like out of sight, out of mind, sort of, so that it's harder to get to those indulgences. So burying the ice cream at the bottom of the freezer. If your partner's not willing to not bring it home, getting him or her, getting them to bring ice cream that's not your favorite flavor. And then, yeah, burying it deep in the freezer and maybe putting the bowls on a higher shelf, or like doing like anything you can do to make it harder to consume that food is better. I know not high shelves, I guess, don't work for everyone. But for me, my kids will have we still have Halloween candy here. And we keep them in like a bucket with a lid on the top shelf of our pantry most of the time. So again, it's just hard for me to get to them. So that then it's not, you know, very tempting for me, that I'm like, meh, whatever. And then planning your indulgences. So if you know it's your birthday coming up and you know you're going to have cake, and you plan to have cake, or you plan to go out for dinner, or you plan to drink alcohol, or whatever you plan to do, if you think about that indulgence and you plan it in your head and you feel really good about that plan, you're probably not going to feel the guilt afterwards. And you're probably not going to go on that slippery spiral slope of, you know, well, I ate this, so then I'm going to eat this, then I'm going to eat this, and then before you know it, your weight gain, you know, has happened. So all of those things make indulging feel better to you.
Yeah, it's, I mean, again, it's funny because we talk about all these things that we want to talk about in our coffee chat, and we try to keep them to 30 minutes. And honestly, this indulging and the alcohol and some of these other topics, we could probably talk for weekends. Right? Like we can do a whole weekend course of this thing. But so this is the thing, guys, just keep in mind some of the tricks that we gave you, again, is only going to work for you if it works for you. And that sounds so ridiculous. But of course, there's certain things that will and there's certain things that won't. And we just want to really kind of encourage you to sit and think to yourself, what does that mean, indulgent to me? What does that actually mean? And I know in our Bariatrics Beyond the Honeymoon, which is for people who are further out, what tends to happen is a lot of those indulgences that weren't there when they were kind of more strict and more focused have slowly started creeping back in. And we see a lot of people being like, oh, chips have come back in my life, or, you know, this has come back into my life. And so understanding what indulgent means to you, I think, is super, super important. Because again, if I have a cheat day and I just go crazy that day, and that's okay for me, and that's something that I've said, I don't classify that as an indulgent. What the thing is that you have to figure out is what it means to you. Because what it means to Christina, myself, Tara, Carol, Frankie, everybody is different. So that, I think, is the biggest takeaway from today. If there's anything else, if you think that we're totally crazy other than that, think about what it means to you to indulge. And when that's understood in your brain, then you can start looking at some of the tricks that we've suggested over the last 30 minutes.
And if you're finding that you need a little more support, a little more accountability, remember we're here in those free groups, the Recipes for Weight Loss Success and the Bariatrics Beyond the Honeymoon were there. And actually, we had a little announcement that we were going to make today, that more details will be coming soon, but our next Fundamentals Challenge will be starting February 1st. So this will be our 4th Fundamentals Challenge. And the amazing thing about this one is it is literally you versus you. So it is you trying to be the best version of yourself, and you will earn prizes. You will have motivation, accountability, all of those pieces. So we will be posting about that later today, I believe, in our 2 groups, Recipes for Weight Loss Success and Bariatrics Beyond the Honeymoon. Tara really wants to try ketchup chips now. They are the best chip. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, so our Fundamentals Challenge number 4 will be announced later today. So pay attention to that if you are looking for a little more accountability. Our members really do find that when they're in those challenges, they stay way more accountable, and members don't think we didn't notice that this last 13 days of no challenge, the accountability factor has definitely plummeted. So yeah, we have that coming this afternoon. So
yeah, absolutely. And guys, don't forget too, as well as every Thursday, our email goes out, and every Saturday, our blog post goes up. So if you are around and you're on our email list, you'll get it. If you are on our website, take a look. And it's really cool because basically Christina and I now leave our coffee chats and we basically write from our own perspective. And I did the blog last week and Christina did the email, and I read the email when it came in, and I was like, ooh, it was just so cool to see where she takes it versus where I take it based on obviously our experience, our background, all the things that we have to say about things. So definitely take a listen, look at those, because they are usually really, really good reads. But otherwise, have a fantastic Monday, and we will be back same time, same place, and next Monday for Coffee Chat.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.